All right, we're gonna move forward because I'm trying to finish this on time since it's Saturday afternoon. So the next speaker is Jessie. Jessie Torrey is gonna talk about her experience. I'm really excited about that. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I am Jessie Torrey, and I'm so grateful to be here, and I'm so grateful that it's a smaller amount of people right now. When I was first asked to speak today, I was told the topic was the burdens of caregiving. While I certainly have a lot of burdens connected to caregiving a loved one with ALD for the last 15 years, the idea of standing up here for 30 minutes and listing all of them seemed like a really bad idea. So I asked them to consider adding the joys, because we all know there are also a lot of joys. And although I'm a bit of an expert about caring for a boy who was diagnosed late, received a transplant, and is living a complicated life, we all know that Jack's story is just one story. I wanted to make sure I represented other stories, other phenotypes. There's a growing community of newborn screening folks who certainly are dealing with their share of burdens and joys connected with this unexpected news they've received. And there are adults with ALD and AMN. I thought of some people who might agree to share some stories with me. I thought of Miranda. Thank you, Miranda, Jack's mom, the other Jack. Her Jack was diagnosed through newborn screening, and I thought of my friend Lori, who's this symptomatic woman with ALD. So I'm going to share. I know there's a misprint here. Anna pointed that out last night. 2 Jacks and a Lori. I'm going to start with my Jack. Some of you may know his story. I'll be pretty quick with it. But Jack was born 24 years ago, which means I am old. He was born healthy and met all of his milestones easily. He enjoyed a very typical childhood until he was 8. During the beginning of 2nd grade, there's him as a little one. During the beginning of 2nd grade, he started showing some weird behavior. He was chewing on shirts, he was unable to find words, and within a couple of months, he started to completely unravel. His schoolwork suffered, his home life suffered. Anna can tell you he was in trouble all the time. We went to countless doctors. We were told repeatedly that Jack had ADHD, and we wasted tons of time with behavioral techniques, even medications, but nothing worked. Finally, after fighting with our 3rd neurologist, they agreed to an MRI. Took another 10 days, but we were finally told that Jack had adrenoleukodystrophy. A month later, which I guess is some sort of record, because they were saying yesterday 3.5 months is normal, so yay, Jack. A month later, he received a stem cell transplant, and the transplant was a success. The disease halted. But when we brought Jack home 100 days after his transplant, he was living a very different life. Jack wasn't just living with the medical challenges of recovering from his transplant. He was fully dependent. Our now 9-year-old son was in diapers. He needed help eating and bathing and dressing and walking, and he had piles of medication that I had to administer both through a central line, which they sent him home with, and trusted me, and a G-tube that he received when he was getting transplant. At first, I was in denial, like I think a lot of parents are. I was thinking that life would go back to normal if we just gave it some time. Then I got angry. Why'd this happen to Jack? Why'd this happen to us? I made deals with God, but all the prayers in the universe didn't return our lives to what we had known. That's perhaps the darkest time I had as a caregiver. This is where I got teary practicing even. I was mourning my son. I was mourning what I had expected our lives to be. My husband was going through a similar time. It was really hard. There were a ton of burdens, a ton of things we were feeling. We were fighting with doctors for answers. There was so much responsibility. We had to learn about this disease that I couldn't even spell. I'm dyslexic. It's really still hard for me to spell. We had to learn how to share the news and who to share it with. We had to encourage our family to be tested. There were so many huge responsibilities I was required to do, and that meant I had to give up a lot. I gave up my career as a photographer. I gave up a bunch of friendships, and I certainly gave up any sense of security. I was also frustrated because often, even now, I know more about this disease than a lot of doctors, with the exception of all you geniuses in the room. And also guilt, something I've felt a lot of. I gave this disease to my son, even though I didn't know I had it. And we had another child. Anna was just 6 when Jack was diagnosed, going through all this. And there was a huge amount of guilt about how I was going to raise her also. So it was really hard for me. It was obviously really hard for my husband. But we did find some joys after some time. There was no one thing that miraculously allowed our family to accept our new lives, to find joy again. But there are a few things that stand out. We started spending less time with the whys, why us, YALD, and asking more time with questions that started with how. How can we get our life back, a life that's not defined by this disease? How can we have some fun? We started appreciating that Jack had survived. He was with us when we knew so many families who had buried their sons. We started to appreciate how our family had held strong, that our extended family, thank you, my mom, and friends had taken such good care of us. And we started to live again, needing to modify the things, but we started doing them again, traveling, being social, laughing. I also started writing a lot. I wrote in that silly Smiles and Duct Tape blog that turned into a book eventually, and sharing our story with people. People started reaching out, thanks Kathleen, and suddenly we were part of this community, and that's meant a lot. I'm getting teary, I'm sorry. Okay, the other Jack. Let's get to it. The second Jack is one of the first boys who was diagnosed through New York State's newborn screening. He was born in January 2016, and he was just 12 days old when his mother, Miranda, got a phone call. Not recognizing the number, she let it go to voicemail, and then her husband's phone rang. Miranda remembers every detail of that moment as she saw her husband react to the news he was sharing. They were being told that Jack had adrenoleukodystrophy and that he needed to be seen right away and not to Google. How many of us were told not to Google? And how many of us Googled, right? But the next day, Miranda's like a superhero, by the way. The next day, Jack's family dove into their new life. Within a month, that's amazing. They had their team and started the protocols that were being recommended at the time for newborn screening families. Miranda used the word surrender as she described needing to trust these new doctors. The feeling of handing, I'm gonna cry again, handing her beautiful baby to the doctors for Jack's first MRI. I'm looking at a lot of the newborn screening families over there. I asked Miranda about the burdens of being a newborn screening mom, and she did share the intense responsibility of finding a team and wrapping her brain around perhaps not growing her family. She talked about the anxiety surrounding testing, the MRIs, the blood work, and the waiting for the call saying all clear, no change. She talked about the fear and the guilt and the endless desire to have a normal life for her son. She talked about the decision surrounding how to share this new information and how to share it. She also, I think this goes here, she also talked about her own diagnosis and how that led to the diagnosis of her father. But there's some happy stuff here too. When I asked Miranda about the joys of caregiving under these circumstances, she mentioned that her husband is a huge support and kind of a balance for her, which I thought was beautiful. Also, she said, I'm grateful for the diagnosis and it's ensured that I never take a moment or a milestone for granted. I think the diagnosis has helped me prioritize exercise and activity for our whole family, which I'm thankful for. I'm also so humbled that my father, me, and Jack have been able to participate in numerous studies and trials. I pray every day that they will find something in my dad that's protected him all these years that can one day be replicated for others. Once Miranda got her footing, it did take her a little while to jump into the ALD community, but not too long. And once she got her footing, she learned all about Elisa Seeger and all she was doing with the ALD Alliance in honor of her son, Aiden. Miranda signed up for one of Aiden's rides and shared a hysterical story about she and Jack showing up as riders as if they had motorcycle or something, which it's pretty adorable. And the rest is history. Miranda's been with the ALD Alliance for a while now, and she is a huge support to so many of the newborn screening families. And beyond that, she's a huge support to a lot of us, and I would like to thank her. Okay, now I'll cry again with Lori. There she is. Well, Lori has known the word adrenoleukodystrophy since childhood. She has two brothers with ALD and a sister. She knew the potential challenges her brothers faced. Lori was diagnosed in 1991, but like so many of us women, Lori was told that although she had the genetic mutation, she would be okay because women don't get ALD. But about 5 or 6 years ago, Lori noticed that her gait had changed, and quickly she started to use a cane. She then was forced to stop driving. Her mobility continued to decline and now relies on her chair to get around. This beautiful mother of two, who had always been the force in her family, the caregiver, now needed some care of her own. Talking to Lori about caregiving was interesting because she is able to care for herself a huge amount. She just needs some extra support. Lori and her husband, Frank, have been married for 30 years. He's awesome. He should wave. And I'm sure many of you know Emma. You should wave too. And Emma's sister, Liv. They are really a foursome to be reckoned with. So although Lori doesn't require assistance with everything, it's wonderful that she has her team. Now, if you've had, this is the fun Lori picture. If you've had the pleasure of knowing Lori, you'll know that she has a way of making you feel good and positive. When I asked how she manages this, she said, we've just learned to adapt. We've learned how to appreciate the little things. We're a tight foursome. We can get through anything. Besides, ALD doesn't make me special. Everyone in the family needs help sometimes, and we're always there for each other. And it's not just her family that she credits for her attitude. The ALD community is a big part of Lori's life, and she's helped so many. Lori is a mentor in the ALD Connects Peer Mentor Program. And she's not just there for her mentees, she's there for many of us when we need a shoulder to cry on or need some advice or just to laugh about how ridiculous our lives are sometimes. So thank you, Lori, for your honesty, your perspective, your sense of humor. Okay, so I've listed a lot of burdens, and I wrote them here. I'm not going to go over them again. But I want you to remember all the joys that I've mentioned along the way. And I have one last story. 3 weeks ago, I fell. I was just out walking the dogs, enjoying the fall weather, and I can't tell you exactly what happened or if my own ALD had something to do with it, but suddenly my feet got confused and I hit the ground hard. I broke a rib, and without any notice, I was not able to do any of the caregiving that's defined my life for 15 years. And last week, Anna Banana, my daughter, came up from Baltimore to help out. She had to get Jack up and out and ready for school. That can be a challenge. I heard her get Jack out of bed, and I heard a few comments about a mess. I watched from the couch as she walked to the laundry room with a big pile of laundry. And a few minutes later, she walked through the living room again, this time holding a garbage bag full of what I could only assume was a stinky mess. I looked at her and I said, "Oh, Bonanza, I am so sorry you have to deal with this." And she said, "No worries, Mom. It's Jack. Sometimes you've just gotta," I'm gonna cry. "You've just gotta wash your hands and move on." So that's what I am going to leave you with. Because she did. She walked back into the bathroom, put on Sirius radio, 70s on 7 is our family's favorite, and I could hear my two kids dancing around and laughing. So if you can learn how to wash your hands and move on, makes caregiving a little more bearable. Sorry I cried, but thank you.
Okay, I have to dry my tears a bit before I can talk. Thank you so much, Jesse. That was amazing.
Thank you.
Okay, Joan, we have a question.
Oh, I had to cut down the speech because I didn't want to go over. Look at Lori's picture here. She's a nut, this woman. She literally throws axes. Look at her. Well, to me, you're doing it like competitively. Well, we're in Baltimore. I'm sure we can find this. Anything else, folks?
We have another question here.
You mentioned the guilt associated with passing it on to your children. Can you elaborate on what helped you to move past that, or if anyone in particular helped you to, face that and to move on from it?
To be honest, I didn't spend a huge amount of time with the guilt. I have heard a lot of moms talk about it, and I felt it was important to mention. I was in such a blur when Jack was diagnosed, and really didn't understand what was happening. And from the time of his diagnosis to transplant was only 30 days. By the time I was told that I had the mutation, I had given it to him. I was also told my mother, my beautiful mother who's over there, also has ALD. We did certainly pause and think, like, how did we not know this? How could something be in our family and have gone unseen? And I feel terrible. Had I known I would have still had Jack, I would have had him a different way. But I can't say there was anything specific that got me over it, other than I was so busy just fighting for my son's life and knowing I was doing everything I could for him, and still do most of the time, except when I'm away in Baltimore talking. Thank you.
Thank
Oh.
you so much. More questions?
Oh.
Needs no introduction.
I was wondering, first I wanted to say, I loved your book, and I was flying cross country and I ugly cried reading your book because it was just so amazing and so touching and gave me so much hope, because it's a story about your family struggle, but there is joy in your struggle. And my question is, where can someone get your book if they want to get your book? Because honest to God, if you have not read it, you are missing out. I have given it to other friends whose children are getting transplants for other diseases because I think it's such an incredible look into the whole process. So
Thank
as
you.
a public service to everyone within the sound of my voice who hasn't read it, I just wanted to know, how can people get this book?
Thank you. Smiles and Duct Tape was published in 2016. It continues to be a blog that I bore people with, or the ins and outs of what our family is going through, mostly surrounding ALD, although sometimes I add some other things. But the book is the story that kind of follows that blog from the time of Jack's diagnosis, really to present day almost, just kind of going in and out of time. Anyway, Smiles and Duct Tape is still on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and I get, huge checks for $4.22 periodically. I'd love to get some more of those checks. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse.
That's it, right?